welcome everyone to our webinar, the webinar on the topic pricing, transparency, and flexibility, how to structure SaaS contracts for growth. And we are super happy to have you all with us. And thank you so much for joining. And we really also hope not only that you will bring some new learnings with you from this webinar, but that you will also apply them in your everyday work and everyday jobs. As said, this is a joint webinar, and we were literally cooking this one because not only because of the heat during the whole summer. So during the summer, we were kind of prepping up this one, and this is why we're also really excited about the upcoming webinar. What is the first webinar that we are doing together? So Vertice and Younium together. Okay, so my name is Hrvoje, and I will be your host, and I'm a demand generation manager here at Younium. Along with me, I have Sarah, who we said, okay, let's be behind the curtains, but she's now also in front of the stage. The idea was that Sarah shares a couple of links with us, but unfortunately that will not be possible because of the setup. But I think that we made the backup plan. So keep an eye on the chat box, because chat box will be your place where you can check some of the resources, what we are going to share with you during the webinar. So really keep an eye on that part. And also that part, I think there is also Q&A somewhere below, will serve you for questions during the webinar, and also after the webinar, we're going to take them in. But before I present you our two main stars of the show, let's just go over a couple of housekeeping points for today's webinar. So the total time is 50 minutes. If you miss something, no worries. We are recording the webinar, and we are going to send you the recording right after, I think 1 day or 2 days. We can also settle that in, and that we have the recording ready for all of you. We will have one poll during the webinar, and also as mentioned, we will have a question and answers at the end of the webinar. Okay. Let's kickstart. I have with us two presenters. So Eric from Younium and Nick from Vertice. Sarah? No? Okay, I will not do this anymore. Let's kickstart. Thank you all for joining us.
Sure. I'll take the agenda here. Hello, welcome everybody. Pleasure to have you all here. So how are we going to structure this today? First of all, a short introduction that gladly Hrvoje did for us today. We're going to kick it off by understanding why are we even here? Why are we talking about pricing transparency? You will see along the webinar the whole time that we try to share the vendor perspective, which I will be representing. And then, head of purchasing Nick will, of course, be representing the buyer perspective, because I think those are both very important. We should not be sitting in our dark meeting rooms without thinking about the buyer when we make those decisions. So there will be a lot of back and forth. Then Nick will deep dive into the buyer perspective some more. After that, I will give it a go. We're going to talk over how to overcome challenges and mitigating risks that come with pricing and pricing transparency. We'll have a Q&A session where, as Hrvoje said, you can drop some of your questions in the chat, and we try to give you the best answers we can. And at the end, we're going to give you a summary, sum it all up, and then thank you all for being here. Yeah, as I said, I'm going to start with why are we even here? Why is that topic so important? And kicking it off from the vendor perspective, pricing transparency is crucial. If you want to win the customer, they need to understand your pricing. They need to see how your pricing ties to your value core offering, to your unique value proposition. You also want to retain your customer, so the customer knows what you have contracted with them, what your pricing model is, and what is to be expected when something happens. So if they suddenly grow, or if they, have to do some layoffs, for example, so anything changes that will affect the contract, they need to be aware of what is going to happen to their contract. And then you also want to have some kind of pricing that grows with the customer. And that can only happen if you retain the customer, of course, and if they understand how your pricing model is going to grow together with their growth.
Yeah, and I think, you know, when it comes to the buyer's perspective, it's probably nothing new to people here, but people want to be able to feel like they're making informed decisions. Ultimately, people are occasionally staking their reputation on when they buy a new piece of SaaS. So it's really important that they understand kind of what that decision means and what it's going to look like in the future. That therefore allows you to build trust with people. So by somebody having an understanding of the decision that they're making and what it's going to look like, that instantly builds trust and rapport. And ultimately, I guess the thing that it stops is it stops surprises. You know, I've seen it in the past where a relationship's ruined by the fact that there's a surprise price increase, a surprise new tier that somebody wasn't aware of, a surprise hidden cost somewhere. And ultimately you end up losing a customer without that transparency. So I think the thing to really take from that as well is you can also be ruled out of being looked at as well, to kind of add a fourth point on here. When when a customer's potentially looking at moving away from a vendor, they want to know what pricing is for other vendors before they go through the rigmarole of a demo. So it also can give you a bit of a competitive advantage there as well. So going through again, kind of digging into that perspective a bit more, you know, I think there are a couple of bits just before I go into these here that, you know, the thing with pricing transparency is it allows you to align with the business needs, that future certainty that I mentioned, but ultimately the things that your customers and your prospects are going to expect is that indicative pricing being readily available. They don't want to know 100% what it's going to cost. They want to have a rough idea of what, like, the different packages that are available or the different SKUs that are available. They just want indicative budgetary pricing so that they can, again, not waste their own time going through, you know, the rigmarole of getting to pricing. I've seen it, and it leads into point two, that you have to go through hours and hours of demos and discovery before you can get access to pricing. Recently, even internally, you know, I've purchased a new piece of SaaS, and it genuinely took me 10 hours of demos with a salesperson to get to a quote. Now, I had to do that for 3 separate tools as well. So you're talking kind of 20 hours plus before I even got to the point of where we got a full quote. And that's just a massive time suck for people too. Turned out that one of the vendors that we were talking to, you know, based on our data, and I'll go into what Vertice does a little bit later, but based on the data that we had, we thought it would be too expensive. Turned out it was much more expensive than we were expecting it to be. So it really is important that you're transparent with that pricing. People understand that or where the kind of ballpark is for that pricing. And the benefit that you get out of the other side of that is that people won't discount you as readily, or if they do, they're discounting you for the right reasons, not the wrong reasons. It really does limit a customer looking at you as a service if they have no idea of what it's going to cost, especially when your competitors may have that pricing readily available on their website. Or it ends up with customers coming to companies like Vertice, where we help them benchmark pricing and contract terms that suppliers may have where they've flexed in the past. And generally speaking, we're going to come in with data around the best pricing you've ever offered someone. Whereas, you know, ideally, I assume when selling, you want to control that narrative a bit more. So the last thing you probably want is a customer coming to somebody like us to get benchmark data on your service and the best prices that we've seen. In terms of pricing models, and it really does talk to, you know, what I was just mentioning, people just really want to understand. Like, I think I can't over egg enough how much people just want to know what's the likely cost of their requirement over the first 12 months. What is a plus or minus 10% of expected use for that cost as well? How's that going to flex? And they want to know how much is the install going to be, because ultimately, as much as, like, you know, SaaS pricing should be relatively easy, there's now always an install cost for whatever you're having, or an implementation cost for whatever you're having, or whatever somebody's purchasing. So it's really important that those prices are made readily available as well. And what comes out the back of that is this idea of fairness. You know, are you pricing similarly to other people in the space? And if your pricing model that you use is different to alternate suppliers, that's fine. If you can articulate why that pricing model is actually better for the customer, not better for you. Like genuinely had a conversation with a supplier earlier today where they said the price was going up because they wanted to employ less renewals managers, and it was going to cost more if you did a 1-year renewal rather than a 2-year renewal because they needed more renewals managers. Like, that's not something that you can say to a customer. It might be true. Don't say that to a customer. Articulate why it's better for the customer. And ultimately, as I say, the type, whether it's consumption, drawdown, user-based, it doesn't really matter. I know Eric's going to go into some of those in a minute. What customers really want to understand and have a sense of is this fair? Is it in my best interest? And like, is this going to help me achieve something with my business rather than help your salesperson, your business achieve what they want to do? So gaining an advantage. I think, I'm in a kind of a privileged place to have sold SaaS for the best part of a decade and now buy SaaS and run a team of people that buy thousands of SaaS contracts for our customers. So I've seen a lot of good, bad, and ugly when it comes to the different things that happen within SaaS contracts and SaaS pricing. And the reason that, ultimately open pricing is important is it's going to allow you to, the reason that you can gain an advantage or how you can gain an advantage is through doing a few things. Have these things written in your contract whenever you can. So true up and true down is really, really important. It gives the customer that certainty I was talking about earlier. It allows them to flex up, flex down. It should also talk to potential upgrades of your service as well. Having that certainty is going to lead you in a really good place as your relationship with your customer matures. Give people an understanding of how a contract is going to end, what the exit fees are going to be. How does the customer get that data back? In what format is it going to come back? And how long will it take? I've seen a lot of customers a lot of contracts fall down where it comes to a salesperson having forecasted a deal and all of a sudden compliance is involved, legal is involved, and they want certainty around how this contract is going to end. They don't just want certainty around how this contract is going to start. Renewal terms, it seems fairly obvious, but again, these things aren't always in there. Are there going to be uplifts? I think a lot of customers will accept uplifts occasionally, maybe not every year, but be honest with it. But put a number on it, put a figure on it, put a percentage on it, and that really helps. Rather than there are some suppliers where they can just put the price up to whatever they want as long as they give 60 days notice. Is leading on to that, is there a notification of when that uplift is going to be communicated to your customers, and will it renew automatically? And then ultimately, what are the options for payment terms? This should be really well rehearsed through your sales team. People should understand and have a playbook for talking through things like monthly billing, through payment terms, and be very certain on how you deliver that to your customers. Don't leave a customer to ask. If you're open and say to a customer, yeah, of course we can do quarterly billing, here's the impact it has on cost, that's taken far better than a customer having to come to you and say, this is a 500 grand contract, like we can't do it up front. What does it look like for quarterly billing? And then the sales rep has to go away and find out. It feels very made up, because in the contract, it's far more concrete, far more secure and expected by the customer when they come to ask. And like I realize I'm sounding a bit like a broken record, but customers just want certainty. Putting these terms into your contract delivers on that. And it will automatically save you a huge amount of time, deliver a massive amount of credibility, and it makes customers trust and believe that you've done this before. You're not making it up. This is the way of the world. And as I say, it just delivers on the fact that this is a certain thing that you're well versed in. Negotiating tips. So this one hopefully isn't too controversial. Always start with the minimum requirement. It is really hard if you go in with your biggest requirement to then negotiate back down. Start as low as you can, build up over time, add things. Don't try and take things away and retain a discount. As I'm sure everyone would expect, competition is massively your friend. Always run a proper process. If you can't run a proper process, at least look like you're running a proper process. Train the people that are buying stuff to not be sold to, and to really talk about other suppliers in the space, other problems that this software potentially can't solve, or solves in a different way. We've seen examples where just like a marginal increase in functionality from a different supplier can equate to like 50, 60, 70% cost increase. So really do train your purchasers to go through, or your buyers to go through a competitive process if you can. And ultimately, the market leader might not be your best solution. A lot of people default to the market leader because it is the market leader. Typically, it's the market leader because it does a lot of things well. If you have a niche requirement, always look at somebody whose service is just your niche requirement. And then the last couple of bits, plan for the worst. As I said before, have divorce terms or breakup terms or end clauses in the contract, so if something goes terribly wrong, how you get your data back. Also, look at your business plan. Look at what your business is looking to achieve over the next 12, 24, 36 months, and build in a plan for, okay, what happens if everything goes really badly, and how will this contract likely impact the business? And the flip side of that is plan for the best and look at, okay, if this goes really well, over the next 3 years, how do I make sure this contract is fit for purpose if we do 150% of our target rather than just 100% target? And like if you take one thing, if you ignore all of that, just don't talk about the budget. Never talk about the budget. It's the worst thing that you could ever do, because ultimately that suddenly becomes what the cost of the service is. So if you absolutely have to talk about the budget, talk about a number that's about half as big as you're expecting, but really try not to talk about the budget if you don't have to.
Nick, thank you so much, and I can't wait to hear what Eric will tell about this. So for those who missed, Nick is head of purchasing, while Eric is account executive. So I think that he didn't like your negotiating tips as much as that I love them. But yeah, I was like, I could already hear Eric. Oh my God, no, don't say that. Thank you so much. Loving those, and especially what you said about the competition, super important. Like, look at look what are your requirements. Do your research. Don't just jump on the market leader there. Like, think what is the specifics for you, and then do a couple of extra calls and put a couple of extra minutes in, well, not minutes, but calls in making the decision. Okay, I will now hand it over to Eric. Can't wait to hear what he will say about. Don't talk about the budget. Yeah, just say everything, but don't talk about it.
Surely it sounds like Nick has been training some of my prospects, so I gotta double check where that's coming from. No, but I totally agree with that. And the negotiation, I think we're all working in a B2B space, and it's part of the game. At the end, everybody should be happy. So I think we all have kind of a mindset that to leave a bit of like room for negotiation when we go into those discussions. I'm gonna talk about a vendor perspective now. So there's might be a lot of things in here you've heard before, but I think this is not something that you do once, those steps to create your pricing model and define your pricing, but more to be like go over them over and over again, because we're in a very dynamic market, and we always have to double check if everything is still suitable for the current market circumstances. So I'll be talking about, first of all, how to create your pricing. And there, I don't know, I could probably make 20 steps here how to do that, but I just want to talk about the major ones that I think are super important. And why am I doing that? Is because it's the base to create your pricing. And if that base is good, then your pricing will tie well to it, and it will be easier to understand for the customer and prospect. So always start out with the research. And I think there's many things in here that Nick has mentioned already. Look at the market, look what the competitors are doing. Always think about your customer or your prospect might already have a similar solution in place. They might want to make a switch. So they might be, already used to a certain pricing model because everybody in that segment is using the same pricing model. At the same time, when you do that, you can also use that as an opportunity. So if you identify everybody's using a certain pricing model and you're like, that does not really make sense. Like, I can totally come up with a better pricing model. Again, as Nick said, you can absolutely do that if you can articulate and explain to your prospects and customers why your pricing model is better. And I think that ties directly into the value proposition. The better you're able to define the unique value that you deliver to your customer with the solution, the better and the easier it will be for them to understand your pricing, right? Because they understand, like, this is the value we get, and this is how they come up with a pricing for that strategy. I'll go over more that when we talk about different pricing models. Segmentation, again, different customers, different segments might use your product differently. They might get different benefits from your product. So always think about, do we have certain, industries we're serving to? So is that industry getting, a different value proposition than the other industry? Or might it just be, as we do it for Younium, because we have only one industry, we sell to software and SaaS companies. So our segmentation is size of the company, right? And that again could be, for a startup company, some things might just be not so important, while I know an enterprise company is super into very data analytics, data lake, extracting data, stuff like that. So really define what market segments you have. If you don't have an ICP, I think that's the worst you can have as a company, to be very, very honest here, because then you will always kind of float around. You will do the best what you think you can for your product, and you will always just sit in your little room and think like, all right, I created a cool product here, everybody's going to like it. That might work in some B2C spaces, but if you don't have an ICP in the B2B space, you are just kind of loose floating around. Models and tiers, as said, I'll go over that a bit more in depth in the next slide. But of course, this step is crucial to tie a pricing model to the unique value that you offer and to all the features that come along with it. Experimentation, I think not a lot of people do that anymore too much. They're kind of too afraid to move anywhere. They don't want to take the risk. They don't want to do the work. I don't know what it is, but experimentation, A/B testing, take a certain segment of your market and just try a new pricing model, right? We've done that surely plenty of times. I think the model we have at the moment at Younium is the third, fourth. I don't know, somebody internally is going to watch it, some founder is going to tell me it's the third or something. So and that also goes to the adaptability. Stay responsive to market changes and feedback. If you realize you might think that is a good model, but it's not working, right? So you struggle to sign a deal with it, you struggle to retain your customers, they are unhappy, you need to react to that. So don't set it in stone. I'm not saying you should, by getting the first feedback, sit down and be like, all right, this was crap, let's do a new one. But instead, just be aware, talk to your customers. And the experimentation here, for example, right? You don't need to go out and create a new pricing and attack a market, big campaign around it. Create some pricing, take some of your customers that are very loyal to you, very close to you, and introduce the pricing to them, right? Hey, we gave it some thought. This is what we came up with. We'd like to get your feedback on it. We think it's a better pricing model for the service that we offer. And then just talk to them, like always talk to your customers. Like it's the best you can do. Cool. Next one. Yeah, pricing models. Again, I'm probably not explaining rocket science here. You've all heard them before, seen them before. I want to, because as in the introduction, I said we try to look at it from the vendor and the buyer perspective. And that's kind of how I want to approach this here as well. So looking at a flat pricing looks great, looks very easy, right? It's easy to manage for the vendor. It's easy to understand for the buyer. But there are major downsides to that. And not just for the vendor, also for the buyer. Like, a flat price will always be one price fits all. I mean, if you go shopping for clothes, it's barely, unless you buy a hat or something, that one size fits all. The same thing is here. It might fit the average customer, but you're totally leaving out those smaller customer. And I mean, you're not going to leaving out the enterprise ones because they're like, oh, this is cheap, awesome. But of course, you're losing revenue. And that's exactly the negative part for the vendor here. It's just like you don't scale with that, right? So you can still use flat pricing models, but I would never use that as or rarely use that as the core offering. It's a bit different if you have a very online sales heavy business, because then a flat price for a certain segment might be the easiest to communicate, while a more complex pricing model, might be good if somebody, a sales representative, is available to really explain that if needed, even though it should be hopefully self-explaining. Quantity takes the whole thing a step further. I would say a very, very common price model in the SaaS and software industry is charge per user. And that is much more advanced than a flat price, because if the small startup only has 2 users, they're only going to pay for 2. If the midsize has 45, they're going to pay for 45, and so on and so on. So it caters a lot of them. The problem here is you will get into those, especially like going into like the enterprise, those really big deals. They will be like, this is so much quantity, it doesn't make any sense anymore, right? So they are looking for like, if we take this many users, we want to have a discount on it. And that actually gets us into like the volume and tiered one. So maybe a short explanation here, because I get this question in meetings and demos a lot. A volume is pretty much saying the more you have, the more you use, or the more you sign up for, the cheaper will become. While a tiered one is always you start with a base and then you add to that base, and each add becomes cheaper as it goes. And I think that is in most cases the best offering or the best pricing model you can use for your core offering, because it really fits, gives you the capability to fit multiple segments in one pricing model. And this is exactly what you want to do. You want to keep it as easy and fair as possible. So have a tier. First 10 users are going to cost this, then they're going to cost this, then they're going to cost this. I think a challenge that comes with it, but we can talk about that later on, is always to manage these, because if that's the case, you will always have to keep track of that. Yeah. So if you have a flat pricing, you don't have to keep track of anything. It's just flat and it will never change. That's super easy, but again, you're not going to grow with that. Last but not least, consumption-based, fairly known as pay-as-you-go. Sounds great. Sounds great for the customer. It actually is not so great for the core offering again, because they cannot expect any kind of pricing. What happens if they have a spike in April next year and suddenly they pay quadruple what they normally pay for your solution? It totally messes up their budget and everything. So they can't look in the future with that model. Well, with a quantity and a volume model, the expansion pricing, how it's going to go when you grow. And the same thing I would say on a negative part is for the vendor. They cannot calculate any revenue, right? If they use 3 months and then the 4th month, they were still going to have the same cost, but suddenly half of their users are not having any usage anymore, and then they really struggle with getting their revenue, and so they would and they're having huge dips. Yeah. And again, you need to track consumption as well and invoice for that. So the whole process of that is, I would say, if we have any finance people here, they can probably relate to the struggles of that. Yeah, next step is now we want to put this all together, the learnings that we have from that. So I said it multiple times now, focus on a value-based core offering, right? Have one pricing model if possible. I know every company is different and I know it doesn't fit for all of them. But if possible, try to have one core offering. I'll explain that to you on Younium. We're a subscription management solution, so we deliver value when it comes to recurring revenue, meaning our price driver is recurring revenue that runs in Younium. And that's it. That's the core service that you can buy standalone as it is. We have different tiers for that. A volume-based pricing, the more you have, the cheaper it becomes comparing to the revenue that you're running in there. It's very easy. It fits on one PDF slide for all the segments that we have. And I recommend everybody to really aim for the same thing. Create upsell opportunities by offering add-ons, and those structured into functionality groups. Again, here I'm going to talk about Younium. Like, we have our core offering, which is our platform. And on top of that, we want to have different integrations. So for us, for example, CRM integrations and finance system integrations. So it's one box. Those are our CRM integrations. It's one box. Those are our finance system integrations. And then we have a small box of on top features that they can use. I think that's super easy. That fits on the second slide of our pricing deck. So again, they can easily access that. Combine different models. That's what I was saying, and why I showed the models before here as well. I think it's very smart to have a combination of different models. So a flat price in itself is not a bad pricing model, right? But it's a bad pricing if that's your core model, because how are you going to grow with that if it's just a flat price? Instead, how we do it, and it's not me talking about Younium because I think we're awesome, but just to give you you can relate to what I'm talking about a bit. Our core offering is volume-based. Then we have our integrations, which are flat-based. And then we have, for example, a quoting module in Younium for sales that is user-based. And then we have a feature if you want to send e-invoices from Younium that is usage-based. So there's multiple ways for us to grow with them, but it still makes it very easy for them to understand it. One thing I want to point out here, because I said it in the previous slide, when it comes to consumption-based pricing, it's all right. It's good to have, and there's many things where it's like perfect, the perfect choice, but don't have too many, because again, then if you end up having 10, it's really hard to predict costs on that. For the customer, it's really hard to predict revenue for you on that. And it's really, really challenging to actually streamline that so you can actually invoice them on a regular basis for the exact usage that they had. What I said before, have easily understandable visuals, and I think many of those points really dip into what Nick has said earlier. They should look at it, and they should not have a hard time understanding what this is all about. Like, usually in my meetings, I show the pricing, I shortly explain it, but I almost never get any feedback questions on it. It's very self-explaining, and that's how it should be. Also, because you have to understand in the sales process, for example, it might not be that all stakeholders are involved in all the meetings that you're having, all the back and forth. They just get something presented and then the business case presented and need to make a decision. They should be able to look at the pricing and be like, all right. And again, what you said here as well, Nick, have something, this is what it is now, but also this is what it's going to be in the future. And if you use a volume-based, you already know this is where we are at right now. We know we want to be at this much revenue in 3 years. This is going to be our price in 3 years. So all the terms are almost within that pricing model already and very predictable. I think it's important that you're ready to be flexible for all corner cases. And I think that's kind of part of the negotiation, what Nick had said. I mean, you will always have somebody like, hey, we just bought a solution, we're unhappy, but we're still committed. Can we still go with you? Like, there's so many scenarios where you need to be adaptive to a business situation that I think it is very, very, very important and crucial that you have some kind of strategy, like how are we going to deal with those cases? And going back to what I said in the last slide, be ready to change your pricing if you feel like the market is moving a lot or switching to a new model, then you should be ready to adapt this as well. I know this comes with challenges for the finance team, but they can be solved. A couple extra things here. Excuse me for a second. Just a few things I think that are important that can really help you going forward is have standard contract templates with an option for particular terms and conditions. The terms and conditions that Nick was talking about, I think they're crucial. They should be everywhere. But if you have anything out of the ordinary that needs to be put in there, have a separate paragraph. Don't make it end up in some long paragraph where it's just hidden somewhere and you really have to read through it over and over again. Have one part in your contract, particular terms and conditions, and just stack in there what have been negotiated or agreed upon. Because then again, when they are your customer and they want to go back to the contract at a certain point, it's easy. They have a front page with the pricing, with the contract terms, and then they have this particular terms on the next slide. Have clear terms of service on your website or in the contract. I think on the website is always good because it's accessible for everybody. Don't hide that in the evaluation process. If, like Nick said, if legal comes in, they might want to have a look at it. You don't want to have 10 emails back and forth with them. They want to just go on the website, check it out, see if there's any red flags or anything, and make the process much, much easier. The expansion pricing in contract, I have a really good example for that one. I talked to a prospect, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago, and they wanted to start very slow with Younium with like 100,000 euros ARR, but they want to expand it to 90 million euros ARR in Younium over 7 years. And I knew I was up against a competitor, and then I made him an offer. Like I showed him on a spreadsheet how would the pricing actually like evolve over time for each year. And then he calls me and he says, yeah, but your competitor, they cap at 50 million. I was like, hey, no way. There's no way they're capping at 50 million. Like that would not make any sense to me. So I was like, you should give them a call and double check that. And he calls me the next day. He's like, yeah, you're right. So they knew that they were going to expand to 90 million, but they had nothing in their contract that actually, like in the quoting, that actually showed that expansion, right? So he was sitting there and didn't understand it. And I mean, could give him an advantage, but that's not going to be a happy customer when they find out that this is not what they were expected to happen. So talking about the renewal that Nick has talked about, have the expansion pricing in your contract, right? You have a first page there, you show this is going to be the pricing for the first term, what we agreed upon right now. And on the second page, just use it for expansion pricing. Like if this is going to happen like downwards, if this is going to happen upwards, this is what's going to happen to the pricing as well. Can give you a big benefit and can help you close deals that might not be big right now, but that have like huge potential in the future. Adjustment clause, a lot of companies, especially very big companies, I think Nick sees that in a lot of negotiations as well, they have no clause about any adjustments, or a very, very open clause, let's so to say, which means they can pretty much adjust their pricing whenever and however they want. I don't think that gives a lot of confidence or a lot of like transparency towards the buyer. So I actually think you should be clear what your adjustment clause is. Is it, you know, tied to some kind of, to the CPI, to some kind of index, what you can do? Is it maybe capped? Because I won deals over that, to be fairly honest. Like we have a capped adjustment, and our big US competitors, they don't have nothing. They can just randomly change the price whenever they want. And if you take a decision for a company with 12 subsidiaries or something, you want to have like, you know, a peace of mind, and you know what you're getting yourself into. Cool.
Great insights, Eric. Thank you so much. This is the point in the webinar where we would like to hear from all of you. So we have a poll, and we are going to launch it in a second. Just that I find it here on my screen. Just like do it like this. Okay. Eric mentioned it, and Nick also. It's really, really important to be also transparent. So do you have the pricing on your website? So really, really easy and straightforward answers. Yes, no, and partially. And we will also kind of like to hear from our speakers that they kind of comment also these results. Let's give it a couple of more seconds to get a couple of more answers in. Of course, Nick, if you want to add on some of the additional things what Eric mentioned to us.
Yeah, I think the thing that rings through both of our presentations is that like deliver certainty to people. I think that's the most important thing. You get credibility from certainty and understanding what things are going to look like in the future, and it just makes you look like you've done this before. There's nothing worse than not trusting what your suppliers are telling you.
Yeah, good point. Very, very good one. When we look at the results of the poll, 23% of our audience says yes, they have the pricing on their website. 46 no, and we have 31 who have it partially. So any comments, guys, on this one?
I mean, Nick's not gonna like that one.
Yeah, look, I think you know, sometimes there are reasons why you can't have pricing on a website, right? I don't think it's necessarily something that you have to have all the time. But I think the reason for that are few and far between. And you know, I'm pretty used to seeing kind of partial pricing. I think partial pricing gives people a decent insight into what it could potentially cost.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think there's up and downs to both of them. Of course, in the evaluation process, you said that as well. And I agree with you. It should not take you 10 hours to get a price indication. That should not be the case. But then at the same, like, of course, you know, from that perspective, going on the website, having the pricing available, amazing. But the example for Younium I can give here is we don't have public pricing. Like, give me a call, I'll share my pricing with you happily. But the thing is, we deal with a lot of first-time buyers. So I think there's not that much that they have any comparison into other solutions already when it comes to like, what's the reasoning behind that? How is that tied to the value and everything? So I think it's just a smarter move to do so for our case, but I understand there are different ones. And I totally agree with what Nick has said. I think there's a good opportunity to have some kind of like, let's try to give a price indication. I mean, you see it a lot of times, you know, this is starter starts here, professional starts here, enterprise, give us a call. And that's good. It gives some, but the danger here is also it could give a price indication. So they're thinking in their mind, all right, it's going to cost me like 800 euros a month or something like that. But then you actually get to sit down with them. They're like, yeah, but you have this many users, you have this many sites, you have this many, that much usage. And then it's suddenly quadruple the price. And then you're not in a very good spot, I can tell you that. So I think there's ups and downs to both of them. I think if you have a very public pricing, like everything public, that's more for like streamlined online sales a lot of time. Or if you don't want to work heavily with a sales team. But if you have lower ARPA, like average revenue per account, so the deal size is usually on those self-service ones not as high as the ones with the negotiated and sales-driven contracts.
Great. Great insight. So when we go then, and we can connect it with the poll as well. So we will, and it will become also good that we cover also public or not public.
I vote for public where you can. I think it's good to give people indication of cost. You know, even if it is a starts from price. I think it gives people a little bit of an insight.
Yeah. Yeah, I vote for partially. Let me say. But I have to say, just to adding to this, if you do partially, make sure it's very easy understandable. Like all the points I've talked about long and wide today, make sure you really have them considered and good in place. So if they look at your pricing on your website, they're like, easy, I understand it. So you don't end up with them having some kind of price expectations and you quadrupling it.
Yeah. Cool. Shall we go on to the next slide?
Go ahead.
Yep.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, so of course there's many challenges. We've all been there, sitting there, trying our best and struggling. But a couple of ones I want to focus on here is the management of the contracts. So if anybody here is a data analyst, CFO, CRO, COO, they will be very familiar with that. If you have multiple contracts in place, and the topic is flexibility here as well, and flexible contracts. If you have multiple different contracts in place, it gets harder and harder and harder to manage them. If you then do some A/B testing and you have different pricing models in there as well, and then have some legacy pricing in there as well, and then you want to invoice them and need usage in there, I mean, it gets over your head very quickly. So make sure that you have a reliable and scalable process, because a lot of times I talk to companies with 20 million that want to go to 50 million. And they have their process for invoicing is a spreadsheet. I mean, that might not be so scalable. But if anybody interested in that, I would not be in a commercial role if I would not pitch Younium here. So have a chat with us. We're focused on advanced B2B software and SaaS company subscriptions, connecting with the different systems, automating, giving you insights, the billing and everything. Then the corner cases, and I think, the topic of flexibility strikes here. Have a strategy for special markets, special prospects, different special, circumstances where a prospect might be in or a customer might be in, so you can react within your, contract framework. You can react within your pricing model framework. Staying ahead of the competition, never ever lose focus on your unique value proposition. The opposite is the case. Try to actually, focus so much on it that you really deliver even more value in that specific segment where you are situated in. And that's always going to stay ahead of the competition. If your competition has no ICP, and believe me, I've seen that before many times. If your competition has no ICP, they do something random, while you might be the one doing something specifically for them, and that will always give you a benefit. Complex price models. I think here as well, you have a challenge. If you use different pricing models and you kind of combine them into one, like we do, for example, make the best out of it to really have a clear documentation. Don't make it 5 spreadsheets, super long spreadsheet tables, and then they have to go through a matrix to kind of find their pricing. Make it very clear, 2 pages if possible, so they can all understand it.
Cool. And then for the buyer, we'll take a journey back to the beginning and talk about, the things that the buyer's after, right? They want a service and a contract and a pricing model that's going to align with their needs now, and that's aligning with, the business goals and the business growth. They want future certainty, including things like volume discounts in the future, understanding how our scaling contract is going to impact them, as well as future certainty of duration in the future and termination clauses. And they want an understanding of what can be flexible and when can it be flexible and how is it flexible. The problem that most companies really suffer with is they don't know what of those are negotiable, aren't negotiable, and it can end up adding quite a long time to a sales cycle. So you have to consider, how do you give them peace of mind across all of those things, and how do you make it easy for them to navigate that process in terms of their finance, legal, and compliance requirements. And much like Eric, it wouldn't be right for me to not say, that's exactly what me and my team do every day. We negotiate thousands of SaaS contracts for customers ranging from 100 people with 250,000 euros, dollars, pounds of SaaS spend up to the tens of millions. And we bring that level of certainty and understanding to your contracts to make sure you're getting the best commercial arrangements that we can get you.
Great stuff, guys. Thank you so much. And I really hope that also all of the insights what you shared today will help our audience in their, as we said, in their day-to-day work, and that they will bring something with them tomorrow at work. And kind of in a way also these learnings are always good for sharing and also kind of sparring. So this is why we have a Q&A, but we are slightly behind the schedule, over time. So we will take 1 question, or 2 questions we have. So we are going to take those, and the rest we are going to answer with the email, just not to step it too much. So what I will, I have one what goes directly towards Nick. What are the 1 or 2 things a vendor can do to their pricing to make themselves more attractive to a buyer?
I think the first thing that you can do is make it easy to get hold of pricing. And that doesn't, as I say, it doesn't have to be 100% accurate pricing, but you should understand what a customer requirement is after a half an hour conversation. Mm-hmm. Don't make them sit through demos and discovery, hundreds of times. Give them an indication of what things are going to go towards that pricing, and let people know, as I say, that early budgetary cost. We try at Vertice to get pricing out to people, budgetary pricing out to people as quickly as possible, so that they can really understand what the cost of ownership is going to be. And then the second part of that is also tell people what it's going to cost in the future. People know that prices change and things change. Let them know the mechanics behind that so that they have that level of certainty when they are staking their reputation on purchasing your SaaS for their business.
Great. One thing what I didn't mention, because also the topic was super interesting, is that Karin stepped in because of the technical challenge that we had. So please keep an eye. I hope that you kept an eye on the chat. She shared some really good links, and also how you can get in touch with both with Nick and with Eric. And I have one question for you, Eric, and let's see if something else will jump in. But what do you think about switching existing customers to a new pricing model? Like, this is a really interesting one. I was waiting for this one. You're muted, so this is now.
I'm back. Yeah, so I'm thinking it really depends. So what I see a lot of times happening is they don't want to switch them, or they don't want to do anything because they're super afraid of it, right? They don't want to touch the customer. But if you have a pricing model where you can stand behind it, and I said that, I think, in an earlier slide, right, where I said, like, go to your customer, talk to them, ask them, like, what do they think about it? I really see no problem if that is a pricing that is going to benefit them, and it should benefit all your customers if you make any adjustments to that. So if that is a more clear pricing and you can explain the benefits to them, then do it totally. I also do understand if you see a risk, or that might be that you lose a lot of revenue moving them to a new one. Of course, that is a business decision where you might want to consider leaving them on some kind of legacy pricing. At the same time, I said that before, you will always have the challenge to manage multiple of those pricing models when it comes to, like, all the contract management and insights and stuff like that.
Great.
Can I add one thing on that as well?
Sure.
I think it's just give people time. Don't drop it on them right at the last minute, which is what we see happen so often. It comes to your renewal, and all of a sudden your pricing model's changed. Like, tell people as soon as you're putting it in place so that they've got time to digest it.
Yeah, I agree with that, Nick. I just recalled a situation where I got a customer by him calling me like, hey, I need to switch to another vendor. I was like, what happened? They're like, yeah, they just switched my whole pricing model. I'm paying 3 times the price now. They didn't give me, they just give me the new invoice, right? I'm like, all right, that can't be happening. So again, here, communication is key. Talk to your customers, be clear, give them time. Yeah.
This is very much linked to the last question what we have, and then we're going to wrap it up. I need really to use this one because I think it will be really interesting. Nick, what are some terms that customers always try to or should negotiate out of a contract?
Yeah, I would always try and take an auto renewal out of a contract. I think that only typically bad things can come from an auto renewal. And I worked for a vendor previously in a previous life where an auto renewal was legitimately important to the way the service ran. We would take it out because we understand if people are still using the service, they're ultimately going to pay for it. And an auto renewal clause is really only there to protect the vendor if you've moved off and forgotten about it. So that's the one that I would be always taking out.
Interesting. I want to add to that from a vendor perspective as well. If you want to do it as a vendor because it's just that's your standard practice for it, especially the reasons that Nick has just pointed out, at least make it very clear and then really stick to it that they're going to have renewal discussions in timely manner, right? So not like, all right, your notice period is 2 months, let's have it like 10 weeks before that. Like, have it 3 months, give them at least 4 weeks to react on it if they need to. Don't try to, like, who wants to retain like an unhappy customer? That does not make sense. He's going to find his way out sooner or later either way. So this 1 more year of revenue is not going to give you anything. You want to have him in the long run. So just approach him fair and honest.
Yeah. Okay, 5 minutes over time. I have one more, Eric, for you, but I think that we can take this via email. It's how would you define the success of your pricing structure, and what points would you measure? If you can do it in 5 seconds or 10 seconds, I will let you. But
can you give that to me again? I did not quite catch it.
How would you define the success of a new pricing structure? What points would you measure? 5 seconds, 10 seconds you have, and I used already 5 from those 10.
Yeah, so again, customer feedback, prospect feedback. I would talk to my prospects. If you have an A/B testing, then of course you can test it one-on-one with the other pricing model that you have in place. You can check how much revenue am I getting with this pricing model versus this model, how much deals am I closing with this model versus this model. So I think there's multiple ways to check that. I think the true success is at the end, to be honest, are you going to hit your targets, right? That's the bottom line where it comes out to. Are you going to hit your targets with that? And if not, stay flexible and make some adjustments if needed. It's not always the pricing model. It's one part of the bigger picture, right? So it's hard to make everything just depending on the pricing model.
Mm-hmm. Okay, this is the summary of the whole webinar, but as said, we are going to send it with the PDF, or I mean with the email, because we are over time 6 minutes and we don't want to hold anymore. All of you rather that you go and I don't know, go for a walk or think a bit about what I said. A lot of things are rather super valuable insights. Nick, Eric, and Sarah, thank you so much. Thank you everyone also for joining us today. As mentioned, recording will land in your email in 48 hours, something like that. Also, yeah, chat box, reach out to Nick, to Eric via LinkedIn, follow us on the LinkedIn pages, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks a lot.